Hello and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake Lamore, and this is our monthly episode where we team up with the Kankakee County Museum and we talk about something history-related here in the county. And we're joined once again by Jorie Walters and Jack Klasey. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you. We're always happy to be here, Jake.
I'm always happy. It's one of my favorite times of the month, getting to talk to you guys. And today is an episode that a lot of our listeners have requested since we began the podcast a couple years ago. It's something that was on my list when I was first getting ready to launch the podcast, and that is the Kankakee State Hospital. That's what we're going to get into today. So I'm curious to know what led up to the building of the Kankakee State Hospital. What was happening in Illinois?
Well, I think we should go backwards in time just a bit.
Okay.
For people to make sure they understand the buildings we're talking about. What is now Shapiro Developmental Center, and the clientele there today is about 1974 or so. Named after our Samuel Shapiro, our governor, who also was from Kankakee. And the clientele there is for people who are mentally challenged, that they can't live on their own. So that is who is housed there now. Before that, it was called Kankakee State Hospital, and that was for mentally ill people. And then same buildings and everything, same campus. Before that, it was titled Eastern Illinois or Illinois Eastern Hospital for the Insane. So
not politically correct in today's terms.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
But for anybody to understand the connections between them. First it was one, and then same clientele with Kankakee State Hospital. They just changed the name. And then the mentally ill society changed dramatically, and they didn't keep people in hospitals anymore for that. And then it changed over to what it is today.
It was in 1974 that it became Shapiro.
Right.
So for anybody, that's how it went. It's all the same client, almost the same clientele, not quite. But for years it was, and now it's changed. But it's the same facilities.
Right.
With also differences. They don't grow their own food anymore. They don't, So I wanted to make sure that was clear for everybody.
Yeah. No, it's good to have a little bit of an overview. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, now we can go back to the beginning.
Yeah. No, I'm just curious as to kind of what was going on in Illinois at that time, because this goes back to the 1870s, right?
1877.
Yep. There were hospitals for the insane, as they called it, in the northern region, southern region, western region, and then they chose one for the eastern region because others facilities were overflowing, so they needed to, and we were in competition with other cities as well for this.
8 other cities, in fact.
Yes, Bloomington, Champaign, Charleston, Danville, Decatur, Kankakee, Paris, Paxton, and Pontiac.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this might be a good time to introduce a bit of local lore, which is not correct.
Okay. What? Oh, I think I know what you're going to talk about. Go ahead and spit it.
Old timers especially will say, well, Kankakee had a choice. They could have the state hospital, or they could have been the site of the University of Illinois. And of course they chose the hospital. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. The Illinois Industrial College, which became the University of Illinois, was established in 1868, 9 years before the Kankakee facility for Illinois Eastern State Hospital for the Insane was located here.
I still wonder how that got started. I'm sure someone just dreamt that, and how is that not true? Is there just no documentation supporting that?
Apparently not. Well, the thing that actually makes it, a non-starter is the fact that the college was started 9 years before.
Getting that established and out of the way. Then we get back to why did they end up choosing Kankakee over all these other area cities?
The state legislature approved a bill saying, let's establish a fourth state hospital. And so in order to do so, they set up a commission. The 7-member commission was appointed to select a location for this. And so they went out and investigated. They actually visited 9 cities, as Jorie noted here, Kankakee and 8 others. And each town did whatever it did as far as trying to influence them. They had parades or they had whatever. Kankakee did kind of smart. Their delegation, the commissioners were traveling from town to town by train. So Kankakee's delegation boarded the northbound IC train at Gilman. And so they had all of the time from Gilman to Kankakee to work on these guys and tell them, hey, what a great place we've got here and so forth. When the train arrived at Kankakee, there was a fleet of very nice carriages borrowed from some of the top families in town to make a good impression. They weren't going to put them just in a livery hack of some sort. So each of the commissioners, I think, had his own carriage, and they headed down East Avenue to River Street, made a jog over, and went across the Washington Avenue Bridge. And then they turned left from there because there was not much going on south of town and the other end of the Washington Avenue Bridge at the time. There was some building, but if you went a little further east of there, it was all farmland and mixed forest and so forth.
Yeah, because it's still so pretty early on in our history in the late 1870s.
Originally, the amount of space that was available was, I think, 150 acres. 250 acre site. And that was, they were driven out there and talked about it and so forth. Then the commissioners went back to Springfield, and on August 5th, 3rd, 1877, they ended up voting 5-2 for Kankakee. Champaign and Paxton also received those, but Kankakee definitely was sold on as the right site. And they eventually, the grounds became almost 1,000 acres over a period of time. But initially it was a 250-acre area that was set aside, and there was no development. It was all farmland or open prairie.
Did anyone own it?
Cowgill Farm.
Okay.
Didn't really see
Dr. A.L. Small owned part of it. I'm trying to think. There was another name. Maybe I think Eads. I'm not sure. The name doesn't. But there were several owners of fairly good-sized chunks of land there.
And it was a town in itself.
Oh, yeah.
And they decided to do a different layout for this campus than they did in the other ones. And they decided to do a cottage system, more like individual buildings where the people lived. And they lived, I think, in smaller groups than before in the other book. I have a book at the museum if anybody is interested. I have tons of information on this if anybody wants to come in and look.
Yeah, there's so much.
It lists all the different hospitals and their designs in this book.
And this was a Kirkbride plan, right?
The main building, the tower building, which had 2 large wings, was on what was called the Kirkbride plan. Now, this is the older way of building in hospitals and asylums, where there were huge wards that held several hundred people, for example. And in this particular case, the one side, the wards on one side of the tower building were for the women, and the other side of it were for men. And this was followed throughout with the cottages as well. They were separated. But the Kirkbride plan was the older method. The newer method, called the cottage plan, stressed more intensive treatment and smaller groups of people. So the cottages were not teeny little buildings. They were pretty good size. They had probably 75 patients in each one and so forth, and some of them even a little bit larger, some a little bit smaller. And they're very substantial stone buildings, just like the main building.
Okay.
The original set of buildings was, I believe, somewhere around a dozen buildings, including the tower building and so forth. Later on, it became several hundred.
Right. Yeah.
Not all treatment buildings. Some of them were specific for, storage buildings, maintenance buildings,
offices, probably.
The farm. What were some of you were just saying, Jorie, about some of the other
buildings
operations there?
Oh, I find that. Yeah. They did get this idea from a hospital in Belgium, a mentally ill hospital in Belgium. Mm-hmm. I did read through that. But they had different points in what I'm reading that listed the different things about this hospital that was kind of different. No people are railroaded into this or any other Illinois state hospital. Courts get involved, but it's ultimately they kind of had this idea in Illinois that by this time people should be treated humanely, and different techniques were used that they wanted to differentiate from the harshness of mentally ill people before, in decades before. Patients are seen to be admission upon the physician in charge. They'll make a physical examination. Civil rights are not forfeited by involuntary commission. So they just tried different things that were hopefully going to benefit people in a more humane way. It's kind of like a more progressive.
It's an evolving. It's like any other type of
learning
health.
About the psychology, psychiatry of people.
Yes.
So they were focused on that definitely in this hospital at this period in Illinois.
And we've kind of touched on the building, the actual building of the asylum a little bit on previous episodes. And this was James Lilly was involved in this, and his boats, right?
Yes, we'll touch on those in a bit. Actually, although Lilly was the building contractor for it, he was not selected originally as the developer. Commissioners met and reviewed, various proposals, and actually the contract for $170,000 was awarded to the commissioners of the Illinois State Prison at Joliet to be the contractors. The commissioners, in turn, decided they would handle the quarrying and the cutting of stone for it, but they would subcontract to various other people. So they subcontracted the construction project to James Lilly, who had been the second highest bidder, or the second lower bidder anyway. Originally he was awarded a contract for $148,000. What's kind of interesting that Kankakee, of course, has had for the years many large limestone quarries here.
Right.
But the question is, were those limestone buildings at the state hospital built with Kankakee stone or Joliet stone, since the Joliet people were in charge and were handling the quarrying? I think the stone out there is actually Joliet stone, because the cost advantage, among other things, the stone was produced with prison labor.
Oh, no way. Of course.
And also there's indications here that were various delays in construction caused by stone not arriving on the site by railroad, I assume. So I think even though we have a lot of, beautiful old stone structures in this town, the state hospital is actually probably Joliet limestone.
So that included 12 buildings for the original, or was 12 coming later? What was part of it?
No, there were about 12 buildings in the original. By January 13th, 1880, they held a reception in the center building, the tower building, to signify the beginning and the opening of the hospital. They had like 400 guests who were there, and they toured the building, enjoyed a catered dinner, and they're still being constructed where the main ward wings. Yeah, at that point, at least as far as the notes that I could see, the one wing of the main building was still being built. The other one, I think, came later on. But there were, 3 detached cottages already under construction, kitchen building, a laundry building, and other service buildings, and a tall water tower.
Okay.
And Jorie, I think you're talking about, you had the map handy there.
Amusement hall, infirmary, bathhouse for women, bathhouse for men, coal house, fire department, refrigerator, supply department. And some of these I cannot read because it's a little fuzzy.
Yeah, because it's a handwritten map you've got there, right?
No, that's just typed and it's blurred.
I see.
But many other, kitchen.
So when did they first start bringing in patients then?
Actually, right about that time, I think in January or thereabouts, the first several patients were transferred from one of the other state hospitals, and then they grew. I don't know for sure how many were, but by the mid-1890s, 10 years after roughly after they were, the hospital had almost 1,000 acres and stretched for 2 miles along the river. The buildings that Jorie was talking about, they were concentrated in 160 acres, right where, of course, the main buildings are right now. At that point, the patient population was about 2,100.
Wow.
And there were approximately 400 patient care and other employees, most of whom lived on the grounds. Up until the early years of the 20th century, the hospital itself, and Jorie mentioned it was a city because most of the staff and even the doctors and so forth actually were housed on the grounds themselves. They had their own post office, of course.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. They had their own post office, and if you wanted to send a letter to your Aunt Tilly, who was a nurse and lived on the grounds, you would address it to Tilly Smith, Hospital, Kankakee.
Should have brought postcards. We have postcards that say Kankakee Hospital or Eastern Illinois. Just the hospital, not Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah.
Just hospital.
Just hospital.
Yeah.
That's great.
We have several of those.
Yeah.
And we also have different postcards with different designs on them from views of the Kankakee State Hospital. I didn't think I should have brought one.
Oh, that's okay. That's cool.
Yeah, the 1896 City Directory devoted a whole section, I think it was about 10 pages, to the hospital, listing all of the people involved and what their addresses within the hospital were and their occupations. Wow. So you have all kinds, painters and nurses' aides and farmers and so forth.
Let me read you some of the things that for food.
Okay.
All right. So they had a total of 1,059 acres, 100 acres for the garden, 144 the acres were the buildings, play and recreation grounds. They produced 1,048 and 69 pounds of dressed pork. Dairy was under process of renewal, and it occupies 34 cows. However, this did not meet their needs, and it was necessary to purchase 2,054 gallons of milk. In addition, the poultry yielded some 3,000 chickens annually. The garden furnishes green vegetables necessary, and then they did canning and storage. So They said if it were not for the working patients, because the patients also did help on the grounds, this hospital could not be operated at the cost of $203 a year for each patient.
That's a lot of money back then.
Exactly. But not as much as it could have been. We spend each year approximately $812,000, mainly distributed in 3 large divisions for operation, for fuel, food, clothing, housing, and supplies, and for salaries, and for repair and equipment. But they said because they had patients working, it only cost $203 per year per person.
Oh my, how the laws have changed.
But they said that working was good for the patients.
It was part of the treatment plan.
Sure.
The treatment plan.
Yeah, I could see that.
Work is good for the troubled mind, something practical to do unless the patients are too infirm. Discourages worry and daydreaming.
Yes.
Well, that'll do it to you if you're concentrating on
then other
hoeing
line
the garden.
items, 2,000 pounds of meat consumed daily, 2,800 pounds of bread, 670 gallons of milk, 690 pounds of sugar, 183 pounds of coffee, 2,400 pounds of potatoes, 211 pounds of butter, and 245 pounds of cereal. So...
I mean, 2,100 people, you said?
Yeah, 2,100 people, plus, of course, 700 or 800 staff people.
Yeah.
And they all were served meals.
Right.
There were 40 dining rooms on the grounds because each of the cottages, of course, had its own, plus there were several others.
And then
the logistics of this were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So was that the highest the population ever got?
No. The highest population was in the 1950s, and that was 4,500 patients. However, by 1971, the population had dropped to 1,500 and continued to go down because of changes in mental health treatment approach. It became community-based. People were being placed in nursing homes and so forth rather than state hospital facilities.
Yeah.
So they were in smaller community-based. And eventually, of course, by 71, they were getting, shortly thereafter, they changed over to developmentally disabled.
Yeah, 4,500. My gosh. So how many times did they end up adding on to the hospital then, or like adding more and more cottages?
By 1903, the original dozen buildings had become approximately 50. Of those, 26 were cottages, 15 of them for men and 11 for women. But as Jorie mentioned, there were all kinds of subsidiary things. They had a terrific fire department. They had a fire department that was called in to save Kankakee from burning down a number of times because Kankakee had a very poor fire department. It was a bucket brigade, basically.
And the asylum did burn. There was a fire around the last turn century. Chicago, January 18th Tribune says about 4 o'clock in the morning in the South Infirmary, a detached ward at that point caught fire and was destroyed, causing the death of probably 17 patients and a loss of $25,000. Caught fire, the furnace did, while the night watchman was in the second story of the building. And according to the lock register, he had visited the furnace just 10 minutes before.
Oh, man.
And the flames spread rapidly.
What year was that?
This was about 1885.
1887? Sorry. 1895. Yeah.
So they're burning coal, right?
Yes.
In their furnaces at that time.
Yeah, you can still see the coal power plant from the road.
Along...
Yeah, along 49.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the generator, the old boiler operation. There was a time before that, though, when they also manufactured gas that was used mostly for lighting.
Really?
They had their own plant. Actually, there's the building behind Morning Star Baptist Church.
Yeah.
was a gas generating station for the city of Kankakee for many years.
Somebody asked me about that building.
Okay.
Yeah, we found it on the old 1883 atlas because they had drawings on that buildings.
Yeah.
And
I never would have guessed that.
Yep.
Yeah, the hospital was pretty much self-sufficient in almost everything for so long. Interestingly, the superintendent, and things don't change a lot in terms of politics. The person operating the farming operation there for many years was a son-in-law of Dr. A.L. Small.
Okay, of course.
McKinstry,
yeah. That family eventually moved out west and started a
apple orchard.
An orchard out there. But
and the first superintendent was Richard Dewey, and we are doing him for cemetery walk.
That's right.
Okay, I did. I was going to say that name sounds familiar. I know I just saw that somewhere.
Yeah,
okay,
he was the first superintendent of the Eastern Illinois Hospital.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, sorry, well, that made me think of something. Didn't the superintendent live in this really ritzy house on the property that's no longer there?
Right. It burned down.
Yeah, I saw a picture of that
Beautiful
recently,
house.
and it's the most, you would just never picture that house being on a hospital. Of course, I mean, the main building of the hospital doesn't even look like a hospital building. It's so fancy in architecture. But yeah, if I'll have to see if I can include that picture of that house. But I recently saw that and was just shocked by
it. Was pretty similar in some respects to one of the smaller cottage buildings.
Okay.
It was a good-sized stone building, and it was well made. I think the superintendent's house at Mantino, for example, I think was a pretty good-sized and fairly fancy operation, too.
But other things they had for patients was a beauty shop, a barber shop, a sewing room, tailor shop, mending room, alterations room. That's all.
There also were several craft-type operations that were part of sort of a therapy type of programs where various arts and crafts and so forth were done. And one of them, which is still very popular today among collectors, were baskets made at the state hospital. State hospital baskets command a pretty good amount of money on eBay and things. That's
like wicker baskets?
They were wicker baskets.
Okay. Yeah.
And apparently the design or something was unique. I don't know an awful lot about them, but I know that every once in a while you'll hear a mention of a Kankakee State Hospital baskets.
Yeah.
There are various websites that deal with abandoned state hospitals and abandoned facilities. And there's some very interesting pictures of the old empty ward rooms and ward areas and that sort of thing on those.
Yeah, I believe there's still some empty buildings out there. Some of them have been torn down.
Quite a few have been torn down.
Yeah, but there maybe still is some empty ones out there.
Or some that are actually still in use, too.
There's still some in use, but I remember in recent years taking a drive through there and seeing some that were definitely not being used in any...
just closed up.
Yeah, just closed up, but they could have been torn down by now.
The grounds, especially in the early years and up, well into maybe the 1920s and so forth, were wonderfully landscaped. Fresh flowers. There were flowers planted out. There were little ponds in various places. And there's a greenhouse, and the greenhouse still exists there that was actually had been a greenhouse at the World's Columbiad Exposition in Chicago in 1893. It was part of the horticulture building.
Kind of a dark picture, but...
What was it that wasn't there something specific that they grew in there that won a prize or something like that, right?
They did chrysanthemums, I think.
Oh, okay.
It seems to me there was some variety of... We've seen pictures of the interior when it was being in use, and it seems to me that the flowers that were visible were chrysanthemums.
Okay.
There even was a little bit of a small zoo on the property.
No way.
Had a few captive exotic animals.
Ducks.
Pardon?
Didn't they do something with ducks?
With ducks.
A duck pond.
Yeah, they're duck ponds, yeah.
Another thing I came across in the information is they had a training school for nurses.
Oh, that's right.
There was a special feature of the hospital. The course included 2 years practical work in the hospital wards, 76 lectures on different topics, instructions to massage, and Swedish movements, frequently overlooked in many training schools for nurses. Upon completion of the course, the student nurses graduated, a suitable diploma awarded, and an increase in salary allowed. Wow. Sorry.
It's okay.
Got a frog in my throat. And thus making the incentive for the nurses to enter the training school back when it was still Eastern Illinois Hospital for the Insane.
Nurses from the state hospital played an important role in the influenza epidemic of 1918, the Spanish flu that killed so many people. And actually one nurse from the state hospital died as a result as they were treating patients at what's now the Masonic Temple, that at that time was used as an emergency hospital.
Yeah, I've seen, there's pictures of that, I think, too, aren't there? Yeah.
And we have some wonderful, we've got a terrific photographic collection of the state hospital, and there are some especially focusing on the nurses in their very crisp, distinctive outfits and so forth. There's one that I particularly like. There are maybe 10 of them on a fire escape stairway coming down one side of one of the buildings. It's just a very appealing picture.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about is, before it becomes Shapiro Developmental Center, a lot of the patients there, is it just a plethora of different mental illnesses or developmental issues that are types of patients that are being housed there? Is it just kind of a mix of different types of issues, or still, even back then, was it mostly people with developmental problems?
No, I think it was more psychosis, more somewhat violent or dissociated people. People could be committed by their family or by a doctor.
Depression.
Depression, people who were suicidal, those who were manic depressive. There were a lot of different conditions.
Some that were violent, which they kind of housed a little bit differently. But there also were signs that some people maybe should not have been there. Yes. They should have been in maybe the poorhouse in Kankakee instead. But some people probably did get sent there that maybe did not belong there.
Because they were homeless, probably.
That too.
Yeah.
Or destitute, right?
Yeah.
So we've kind of figured that out over the years. But back then it was still a little murky, I think, as to who.
Yes, because I know that's probably going to be a question for a lot of our listeners is, what types of patients were housed there during that time? What types of treatments did they go through and things like that? I don't know if you guys have records of that.
I have in here a whole list of different treatments that they did. I also have a question when I get research requests. A lot of people ask about records. My loved one was there. Do you have any records? We do have one kind of like a journal, only it's huge and heavy, that is handwritten in pencil, a couple pages for the insane asylum names. Besides that, we do not have any records of who was in there, but I did one time get on the website for Illinois state offices, and I'm like, the record's burned, I know that, and they're not giving that stuff out even if they had it to me anyhow. And so I'm like, somebody's got to have these records. So I did call an office. So I have the information. I don't have it with me, but if anybody is interested in contacting to want to get information on loved ones, I do have contact information. There is an office for Illinois State Humans something division. I don't remember the name of it. in Chicago that has records for the state hospitals, for Kankakee State Hospital and for Manteno.
Okay.
I have a fax number and address, et cetera.
All that.
So I have gotten requests for that. So anybody who's calling in who is inquiring about that, feel free to email me or call, and I will be happy to give that information.
On the list of treatments, what were some of the things that they were doing there to treat patients?
Hydrotherapy.
Okay. And how does hydrotherapy, do you know how hydrotherapy works?
There were various types of it. I think part of it was primarily just as a kind of relaxing means of calming a person with warm flowing water and so forth. I'm not sure if they did electroshock treatments there or not, but I know back in the bad old days, most state hospitals and most treatments of the insane tended to have things like electroshock or
lobotomy,
surgical interventions
Yeah.
that essentially turn people into vegetables.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't know. There was at one point, and I'm not sure that it's still there or if it's even open, could be open. There was in the tower, there was a small museum.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think of the name of the psychologist. Adler?
I don't remember.
There was a very famous psychotherapist who worked there for a number of years, and one of the zone centers.
Was it Meyer?
Pardon?
Wasn't Meyer, was it?
Meyer, yes.
Okay,
Meyer.
Adolf
Meyer, who
yes.
Oh, wait a minute.
his office was up in the museum area, or where the museum is, I think, up in the tower. But in recent years, I don't think anybody's been allowed into that area. It used to be that Jorie has a story here from the journal from 1976 about a museum to be open for public, but I don't know whatever happened.
First superintendent's office, Richard Dewey, and Dorothea Dix. She was in Jacksonville. But there's an article about when this museum was open in 76.
Oh, okay.
So I have that piece of information. And they also had occupational therapy.
Yes.
I'm trying to see the different things that they did. Patients were taught to do things with their hands: weaving, basketry, rug making, quilting, needlework. When their condition wanted to employment, maybe in these different areas. Mm-hmm. There are habit training classes for deteriorated young men and women suffering from dementia, praecox, who have forgotten how to care for themselves. Mm. So there was that.
Or physical exercise activities too, especially done outdoors. Again, we have some marvelous pictures of patients out doing calisthenics and so forth.
Yeah, and I think they maybe they still do. I know they had their own bowling alley out there. I think they had a bowling alley. I think
would not be surprised.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
All kinds there were no padded cells. No padded cells. Neither do we make use of seclusion or mechanical restraint. Much hydrotherapy is used with lukewarm water. The equipment of this department includes sprays and electric cabinets.
So at that time, pretty much, it was more state-of-the-art and a little bit beyond maybe the padded rooms and the shackles.
Yeah.
They were looking to the past and said, we need to do something
just
more.
Like they look at that now and think, oh, we can do this differently.
Right.
And obviously that's what they ended up doing by the 1970s.
Right. Like we look at lobotomies and go, how could they have done that?
Yes.
But that happened.
In the earliest days, the asylums are basically custodial, just a place to remove people from society and hopefully protect them from themselves and each other. Have you ever heard the word bedlam?
I don't think so.
Bedlam is a word that describes a state of wild behavior, noise, confusion, and so forth and so on, which could be a way of describing, the older not state hospital necessarily, but the older asylums. And actually, there's a story behind where that word came from. In England, in the early 1800s, I believe, there was an insane asylum. It was called Bethlehem Asylum, and it was in the Cockney area of, and the people pronouncing the name Bethlehem came out more as Bedlam.
Oh.
And so that ended up being applied at various times, sort of maybe what you might think of as the crowd operations at a heavy metal concert.
Yeah, I get you. That's funny. It's funny how that works out. I was doing some more reading earlier on Adolf Meyer,
yes.
the psychiatrist we were talking about. And the reason why he's so prominent is because he became the first psychiatrist in chief of Johns Hopkins Hospital
in New York.
Right. Yeah, which is a big deal.
Oh yeah.
But before he ended up there, he was at the Kankakee State Hospital. He apparently couldn't get a full-time job in Chicago, and he came down to Kankakee and was actually, it says he served as the pathologist from 1893 to 1895. So not a long time that he was at our
he had
Kankakee
a real impact
hospital,
on mental health treatment, though.
Yes, he did. Like this, he just happened to spend a little bit of his earlier career here before kind of making a name for himself. So it's kind of cool how he got his start here in Kankakee.
Well, to show you how kind of prominent this hospital was, there's something like this in I didn't pull everything we have. It's a huge box I have, so I just pulled some stuff. But we had an article about Shapiro. Could have been this one, maybe. Somebody in Argentina was requesting an article, specific article. I think it was for Shapiro. It might have been Kankakee State Hospital. I don't remember. But an article written long ago. And I'm like, what is he talking about? So I looked through all the boxes, everything, and sure enough, I found it. But in Argentina, they know a person wanted it for research.
I guess you just never know.
Amazing.
You never know who's going to contact you at the museum about something.
I have different countries. Actually, the Netherlands have contacted me before, World War II veterans. Australia. So people like around the world, London, England. I'm like, wow, it's amazing.
Kankakee, or in this, I guess it would have been Eastern Illinois at this point in 1896, late 1890s, was the largest example of a hospital using the cottage plan in the country, and maybe in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we were paving the way,
and there were many other hospitals in succeeding years that adopted the cottage plan, and a lot of people had come to tour Kankakee to see how they were doing it.
Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, that's still in use today.
That's
the
right.
cottage plan is, whether it's at one of the Illinois state facilities like Shapiro, or you've got there's even homes like this in Kankakee where they're group homes.
Yes.
The group homes.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same concept, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
essentially, it's just smaller.
A small number, 6 or 7 patients rather than 75 or 100, yes.
So getting, past, the 1950s, it's at its peak population, 4,500. And then after that, it just declines for the next 20-some years until we get to 1974,
right?
When the state of Illinois is changing how they're operating their mental hospitals, their mental health hospitals, and it just becomes a center for the developmentally challenged.
Yes.
Why was it named after Governor Shapiro? I know he was from Kankakee, right?
He was a strong advocate of mental health legislation. He really worked for improvement in mental health. When he was in the state legislature, I believe he introduced some various bills relating to mental health treatment and state hospitals and so forth. And I think that that is probably why, in addition to the fact, of course, that this is his hometown.
Okay.
Why that was.
Oh, did he die after the fact
I don't remember what year. I think he was still alive at that time.
Oh, when it was named after him?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm not quite sure, but
okay, because he was the governor in the '60s.
Yeah,
right. When he served,
completed it. Otto Kerner's term when Otto Kerner became a federal judge.
So, anything else on Kankakee State Hospital then that you want to share?
I think that it, and especially the clock tower building, has been really a part of the community and a landmark for really more than 100 years.
Yeah, lots of paintings.
Yes,
photographs.
Yes, beautiful.
There's a lot of history there, and I think there's still more to be told. There's some interesting developments. For example, a number of years ago, Acting Out Theater Company actually did a program or did a show out at the state hospital.
Yes, they did.
Was very interesting.
The first Chucky movie, Child's Play, a portion of just a little part of that was filmed out there too, back in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. I believe there also was a state fish hatchery on the grounds.
That's what I was thinking. I'm not duck pond.
Yes,
fish hatchery.
I couldn't think of the right word. I'm like, I had an image in mind.
That was in the
somebody asked about that. Research
late 20s, early 1930s. There was a state fish hatchery.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is no longer there, obviously.
Right.
And if you visit the museum, if you go in the Kankakee County History Gallery, on one of the wall, it's not a wall, it's a sliding glass door that goes out to the middle. Atrium. And we enlarged a postcard of the river, has a river boat, but it has Eastern Illinois State Asylum in the back with all the original buildings that are no longer there, a stack.
It's in our buildings. South Gallery, the Kankakee.
Yeah, it's enlarged. And it covers the whole window, and it's in color. And it has little people in boats. It has, I think, the mini lily in the middle. And a beautiful, so you can get an idea of what the grounds look like back then. And if anyone is interested in looking through photographs or the postcards, just contact me, and I'm happy to get all that stuff out.
Jack and Jorie, thank you so much for being here today to talk about.
Normally, I don't read word for word off of things, but things are just there's so much.
There's a lot there.
It's easier just to read off of what I have.
Yes, as you said, it really was a town, a city of its own.
That's right.
So there's just a lot of information there. But yeah, if you want to reach out, learn more about the Kankakee County Museum or the French Heritage Museum, go to KankakeeCountyMuseum.com. There's also, you can visit their social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. And, or better yet, go visit either campus, the Kankakee County Museum or the French Heritage Museum.
And next month, we will follow up with Manteno State Hospital. And we are the only county in the entire state of Illinois that had 2 insane asylums.
Yeah. Look forward to diving into that.
Yeah.
So.
Manteno State Hospital had a friend in Springfield.
Oh, that helps.
Governor Small.
And Governor Small. There you go. It helps to have those friends.
Yes.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jake, as always.
This river